Hello and welcome everyone to the 13th episode of our Partnership Ecosystems Improvement series. Today we will dive into vendor and partner sales. We will focus on how critical the vendor and partner sales team's alignment is. Vendor sales representatives and partners sales representatives being the main stakeholders in most partnership ecosystems. We will discuss the critical reasons why vendor sales representatives must align with and support partner sales representatives, emphasizing the value this synergy adds to the overall business strategy and why failing to do so usually leads to epic partnership fiascos. So, as always, we have Gilles Esposito, who has worked in channel partnerships and alliances for 25 years, worked with distributors, vendors, and partners, brings a 360-degree view to the conversation on partners, vendors, sales, ecosystems, all of it. And I'm Aaron Solomon, Director of Operations here at Gorilla. I worked with the managed channel sales and marketing programs for a variety of vendors and helped several build some channels from the ground up. So let's get started on this, Gilles.
Aaron?
How are you today?
I'm good. I'm good.
All right.
I don't have my partner in crime with me today,
Yep.
so apologies for that. But it's another instance of family COVID, so everybody will understand, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
But but that's it. So it's going to be just you and I, Aaron. So welcome everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you. Where do you want to start? You want
So
to start by just painting a little situation without any
yeah,
cosmetics on it?
you know,
Because frankly,
well,
from yeah, go for it.
no, I was going to say, on paper and typically as we're mapping these things out, and I know from experience in a lot of the programs I've done, we're working right in between the vendor and the partner sales reps. It's a very rosy picture on paper, but I know that you have had lots of experience. So let's start with what the reality of that situation is
Mhm.
when you're a new partner or a new vendor at in a partnership and beginning to build a relationship, creating trust between the reps, bringing them together to work together. So let's
Yeah.
start with the reality of it.
So disclaimer here. I'm going to talk about my reality or the reality I've observed with some of my colleagues and all that. Maybe some
Sure.
of you in the audience have experienced things much better than what I'm going to describe because what I'm going to describe is not really good. So traditionally, that dynamic that you expect to have for the reason we'll explain later as you present it, is not really good. Now it's there's a lot of conflict, a lot of competition, not a whole lot of communication, not a whole lot of co-selling. It's not pretty, and there's a number of reasons for that, right? And we'll talk about the reasons, and we'll talk about the issues later, but or how to solve the issues. I'm sorry, later. But there's a number of ways you can help influence this, but to present it clearly, you have so I classify companies into five different, when it comes to partnerships, to five different layers, right? To make it simple, it's more complex than that. But you have a first layer where you have companies that are simply pure direct sales company, and you don't have to worry about this. That's fine because they don't believe in partnerships, they don't want to go the partnership route, whatever the reasoning is. They only leverage salespeople. They're all usually, these guys are usually interested into having a partner ecosystem, but their expectation of what a partner ecosystem is very unrealistic from a time frame
Hmm.
perspective. It takes a while to build a partner ecosystem that becomes self-sufficient and can go and manage the entirety of the sales cycle just by themselves and without any support from the vendor and so on and so forth. The yield in terms of result versus investment, so your ROI and your partner initiative is usually coming at, as I tell everybody, in a average way, it starts looking good at year number 3 and really good for 4 and 5, which is the hockey stick effect that we commonly observe in newly incepted partner programs.
Right.
Um, there's a number of things, right? But those companies you don't have to worry about. Then you have what I would call the bulk of partner programs where or partner initiatives where you have vendors that have their direct sales force and they're trying to build a partner ecosystem, but it's very siloed. There's, if any, very little co-sale, and yes, they do compete, right? The direct sales guys compete with the partner sales guys and ladies, and
Hmm.
they want to feed their channel. There, it's really hard to evolve in those environment when you're the channel person supposed to manage and develop the partner ecosystem, right? Then you get into models where they understand how this works, right? And at this point, you have some co-sell, you have programs to enable that and facilitate this, and there's a gamut here that is extremely wide. But I would say between number 2 that I just talked about and 3, which is the one I'm talking about right now, this would be the bulk of what you see. And then you have companies that have a more advanced approach, right? You have companies that have put in place programs that are hybrid sales programs where there's a blend of the function of channel and the function of
Hmm.
sales, and that for me is really ideal. And the last one, it's the very rare companies that have indirect sales only. They don't have salespeople. They have a support system for the salespeople of the partners, but they don't do direct. Very occasionally, they will take a deal direct when it's the policy of the buyer to say we do
Hmm.
not deal with partners, and that may happen every now and then, but it's extremely rare. So, but this type of company are extremely rare as well. So when you look at this, just like everything, you have a wide gamut. Yet you have a trend, and it's that disconnect or that lack of partnership within the sales team inside the
Right.
partnership, right? And this is why I've heard message in the past 20 years from partners that was aimed at the management of the company. I was taking care of the partner ecosystem for saying, the only person we trust here is the channel manager or the channel team, right? That's the only people that are true allies, because yes, they are on your paper, Mr. Vendor. You pay them and this and that, but they will side with us every day, and that's the reality of this. And that leads to a lot of things behind it, right? And it's very often incepted by the behavior of the sales team towards the vendor sales team
Hmm.
towards the partner sales team, right? And this is why. So for example, if you ask partners, if you do a survey, and there's been a number of those done in the past and probably regularly, asking, who do you consider your what are your risk as a partner, right? What is your main competition? What is inhibiting your efforts and this and that? They will, when they'll talk about competition, they will say our two main competitors are number two in order of severity is the other partners that are operating, selling the same brands in the same region or even competing
Same
brands
region,
but in the same area, same
same
region.
verticals.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same verticals, those type of things, right? That's number two. And number one, more often than not, they will tell you it is the vendors. Our number one competition is the vendors. And to this day,
Yeah.
this still holds. And it's not the vendor that is their competitor, it's the vendor direct sales team. That's what they mean, right?
Yep.
And this is, by the way, the one of the reason why when you go present to potentially new partners and all that, you have to make sure that you dissipate this message or dilute this perception as much as possible. And this is why it's wise to have a very, very solid, and I mean very, very solid registration program that explains very clearly the rules of engagement between the direct teams and the partner sales team. It's critical that you have something that is, rock solid to say no, and we, this cannot happen because of that, this and that. And this is also your saving
Right.
grace, the usage of your PRM. If you have a PRM, if you don't, you need one. You can talk to Gorilla for that. But it's the saving grace of the, because if there wasn't this concept of opportunity registration, which is to protect the
Mm-hmm.
partners, nothing else, created in a PRM system, the less than 50% usage of the PRM that you have today would become less than 10%, right? It's
Yeah.
the number one thing of a PRM is, let's face it, the opportunity registration and the partner sales feeling they're completely protected from their competition, which is again number one, the vendor sales team, right? Despite this, you still have infringement, you still have things that happen daily, all the time.
Yeah.
I've every time I've been working at a vendor, this one of the number one topic was to battle internal sales team to explain why this was not going to be a direct deal, right? And it's usually anchored in the culture of the company and all that. And I've observed a lot of CROs and a lot of VP of sales that were at the top of both organizations, direct and indirect, and the ratio is the ratio of what I'm going to say now is really not in the favor of indirect sales, right? So when you observe sales meetings led by these gentlemen or ladies that are in charge of all the revenue of the company, and they talk about independent deals and all that, the number of time you're going to have a CRO or a VP of sales asking the question, why is this deal not going through a partner, is minimal. And that's a direct translation of a company that is extremely vendor partner centric. When they start
Yep.
questioning why a deal is going direct, you're in a good way. You're on a good path. You have a leadership that's going to help propel and develop your channel organization, right? Most of the time,
Absolutely.
what you're going to hear is VP of sales slash CROs and whatnot ask the question, why do we need a partner here? Why is this deal going through a partner, right? And this is like the armor of the salespeople. At this point, of the vendor salespeople, at this point, they're like, you have you as the channel manager or as the channel chief or whatever. You're gonna have to spend such a great amount of time that you could spend differently, more beneficially for the company, explaining why this deal has to go through that partner and why it's legit and this and that. So there's a cultural problem, and that's part of the solution, by the way. And we'll talk about that later. But
Yeah.
as a whole,
So
it's a big problem. Let's put it
yeah,
this way. Yeah.
Andrew has a nice comment in the chat saying knowing how vendor reps are compensated is
Yeah.
very important, and I think that goes along with outlining the rules of engagement in the
Uh,
beginning. That's
the-
something that is
yes
well,
and
it's
no.
coupled with
That's
that,
part of
right?
the yeah. That's part of
Yeah,
the solution, right? So
yeah,
and and we'll talk about that because that's what we call channel neutrality in a at a vendor level is extremely important, and that's one thing. That's not the only thing. That's one thing, right?
right.
Another thing that stems the problem is control. So traditionally, most of your salespeople are going to be people with strong egos and other idiosyncrasies that qualify salespeople. It's not everybody, but there's a lot of that,
Mm-hmm.
and they want control, right? They need to know what's going on. I've had discussion not too long ago with the former founders of a very big cybersecurity company that turned into venture capital, and we were discussing about strategies, about channels, and all that. And they were telling me The vendor owns the customer. And they were adamant about this, and I was like, no, it's like, this is completely unrealistic, right? You're going to sell your $50,000 a year, $100,000 a year, whatever it is, a solution to a specific customer. Imagine how much more the partner sells into that customer, right? You're selling storage, IT storage into a customer. You're selling IT storage, and then suddenly you own the customer. You don't. The
Mm-mm.
partner owns the customer more likely than not. And is this important? Not really, but it comes very often, right? The partner, when beginning of the year, when the CIO or the CTO is going to sit down with people around the table, they're going to talk about a holistic plan about their investment for the year and all that. Something that the partner rep can cover probably all of it, especially if you talk about large partners that have a huge line card of all the solutions that you can think of and all that think of an Optiv, think of a worldwide technology and those companies and all that, right? But even smaller ones, they cover more than just your storage, right? And they want to have a holistic discussion about the whole plan. You're not going to be invited to the table during this discussion. Absolutely not. And those are the strategic discussions that are going to define the next year, if not more than 1 year. But the partner will be, right? Because they have view of everything and all that. And at the end of the day, it's still a quality of life for customers to have one throat to choke.
Right.
And you can beat that, right? Otherwise, if you start buying direct from every single vendor, left, right, center, and everything is interconnected, and something happens, you're gonna start having vendor A pointing at vendor B, who's gonna point at vendor C, and all that. It's gonna be mayhem. It's always been like this in the past. It is still like this today. Where when you have a partner in front of you that says, I'm going to take care of you, doesn't matter whose fault it is, doesn't matter where the problem came from, they're going to find out. And they
Yeah.
know, customers know that the partners are going to bust their behind to make sure that things are going to get solved very quickly. Because if it's not solved very quickly, it's not only the storage that they're going to lose, it's the whole customer with all the lines they sell into them and all that. So I would argue that the ownership of a customer is closer to the partner than it is to the vendor, right? Yet salespeople at the vendor don't see it this way, and they don't want to, because they want to retain control. So one of the problem of control is communication, which in this case might not be very well coming from the sales rep at the partner, and feeding their vendor sales rep the information they need to know what's happening and all that, so no one is ever blindsided about what's going on. But there's a number of reasons. So what I think we should do now is just dive into, why is it important to have a good synergy, good
Yep.
relationships, and a good partnership within the partnerships between the salespeople, right?
Yeah. Building trust. Right.
Yeah, so that's one of them, so but we can start by this one. It's not necessarily in order. I have a cheat sheet in front of me, but it's not necessarily in order of preference. It's like all of those boxes are important, but one of them, and
Right.
that thing I was talking about, right? That trust level is important. If you're a salesperson at a partner, and you have a new deal coming in, and you want to talk to your vendor sales rep, right, about that deal and all that, and you don't trust that person, and you think there's a chance they're going to try to grab that deal direct, you're not going to keep a word about it. I mean, it's like you're going to try to keep it to the last minute without them knowing anything till you get the PO, or you're going to go to their competition if you trust them better. So that's one of the benefits of having your sales team well engaged with your partner team and developing good relationship and a high level of trust, is that it's to dispel that fear that you may lose the deal simply because they're not very partner centric, or they want to keep the deal direct, or as the gentleman was mentioning, they're not compensated in a way that is not going to make them lose money if the deal go through a partner, right? Or lose
Right.
commissions. So that's one that is really important. I'm going to go back to the to my order, right? And I'm going to preface by saying these two organizations, sales at the partner and sales at the vendor, they're your number one in a relationship, in a partnership. They're your number one stakeholders, That's it.
Right.
It's where rubber meets the road, as we say, and this is where it's going to happen. You may have the best relationship with the CEO of I keep saying this to everybody, right? You, as the partner manager for a vendor, may have the best relationship with the CEO of a partner you just recruited or you've been recruiting. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's good. Don't get me wrong, but it doesn't matter more than that. Honestly, the good relationship has to be between your salespeople and the vendor salespeople. That's it. The CEO of that company is never going to bug one of his sales rep who makes their number if they don't generate a dime of your solution, as long as they make their numbers. They don't care. They really don't care. They're not going to risk losing one of their sales guy by telling them, "Oh, you know, the guy there is my friend. You really need to push and sell their pro." And I mean, they might say it, but they will not enforce it. If the sales rep says, "No, I'm selling the other stuff and it works well, and I'm at 150% of my target, and it's July," it's just like nobody cares, right? No matter what your relationship is, they'll pass the message, but it won't go any further than that, right? So these people are
Right.
really, really important, and vice versa. By the way, um, you as a vendor, your problem is that they have a very complex line card, lots of brands. Sometimes uh, I'm reading at the same time, and I'm going to answer
Yeah.
that to Mike. Doesn't the deal registration prevent this? It's supposed to. It's supposed to, but there's always a way to say, you know what, the end customer requires us to sell direct to them because of X, Y, and Z and things like this. I've seen the most convoluted ways to get around rules of engagement. Deal
Yeah.
registration only says that, traditionally only says that you're the first of partners that have registered a deal, and therefore it's yours. And even that can be changed. The number of time I can name some companies, which I'm not going to do this because we don't want a lawsuit, but the number of times that I've seen company retracting deals from partners is flabbergasting, right?
Yeah. I agree.
Uh,
I've
the
observed
deal
it quite a bit.
registration is the beginning for putting this in writing and showing people that you've thought about this, showing your partners that you've been thinking about it, that you have rules around it, and so on and so forth. But it's not the end all be all. The end all be all is trust, and that needs to happen between the reps. Because I have seen very good reps protecting their partners when their boss was saying, "Why is this going through a partner? Right? Why don't we take this direct? We're skinny on the margin or this and that, and we're going to give those guys 25% or 20% or whatever. We need to take this direct." And I've seen reps battling this in favor of the partners, right? Saying, "No, if we do this, that's it. This partner's dead," right? To us, and explaining why it's important that the partner does it because of their connection, because they have, whatever it is on the procurement cycle, they have everything in place already, and X, Y, and Z, and really going to bat for their partners. Unfortunately, it's the exception. But yeah, deal registration is a good beginning of things, but it's not enough, right? That will not prevent your as a vendor, you have a good deal registration, and that doesn't prevent your sales rep from doing whatever they want to do, right? Um, so on this one that I just saw about the larger deal and all that, I mean, that's fine. Fine, quote unquote. If you have rules of engagement that, for example, when Oracle acquired Sun Microsystem, um, they clearly said to their partner, we're interested in you going after the mid tiers and lower tier deals, right? The big accounts we're going to keep direct. And they came up with a list of 1,700 companies, and everybody had access to the list. So from the get go, as a partner, you agree or you don't disagree with this, but the rules are clear, right? If you were to register something and the name you were going to register was one of those 1,700 names, probably your registration was going to be denied, right? So it's fine if, when I say quote unquote fine, it's because I'm not one in favor of restricting partners on any front, especially with large companies, because there's so many different departments, so many different projects going on this and that. Unless you have a full team of salespeople and pre-sales people completely dedicated to one account, when you know everything that's going on day in, day out, partners are going to find things that you're not aware of. And deal awareness is something very important, a concept that is extremely important in a partner environment. So yes, and a lot of partners or a lot of vendors are going to say this: "Hey, we'd rather have you go after the mid tier, customers and all that. We'll take care of the big ones." Most companies can't even take care of the big ones in terms of deal awareness. They don't know what's going on. And it's like, why would you prevent a partner to expand or to get large companies and deal with them and expand within these companies? They're going to be so sticky that if you treat your partner very well, they'll sell your solution in there. And as usual with channel, the sales cycle will be shorter, the procurement cycle will be shorter, and so on and so forth. And you, as a vendor, you don't have to hire more salespeople, which are costly, and you pay ahead of time, and after the deal, but you also pay ahead of time before they produce, not with partners again. So from a scalability purposes, there's still nothing that beats a partner ecosystem. But as you start restricting where they can go, don't touch this vertical, don't touch this geo, don't do this, don't do that, you're not going to create a great situation with them, right? If you tell them the world is your oyster, you can attack everything. If it's already taken care of, we'll tell you, right? And that will be a deal a deal registration that will be rejected or denied or whatever you want to call it. But don't start restricting them, right, through programs or this and that. Now, if you have a list of established customers that have been doing business with you directly for ages and ages, and the idea of them moving to partners to be managed by the partners rather than being managed by you is not appealing to the customer, then fine. And tell your partners, this is my blacklist, right? These guys, and here's the reason why we're dealing with them directly. It's because they requested it or something like this, right?
Right. Yeah.
Otherwise, don't put anything in the mix that is going to show that you're not that partner friendly, or you're partner friendly but with conditions, right?
Yeah.
If you want to be a fully partner-centric company, that's what I'm saying. But that's up to each vendor. So going back, so I was saying, the key stakeholders and where everything happens at the sales level. And so there's a number of reasons that's going to amplify the fact that if you have a good relationship here, it's going to net you positive results, more sales, shorter sales cycles, blah, 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 all that, and many other things as well. And I'm going to go through them, right? The first one, and we talked about that a couple of sessions ago when we were talking about training and onboarding and all this kind of thing, is that training thing, right? You can put salespeople in a class and from the partner and teach them how to sell your solution and all that. They will never learn as well as if they are going into sales calls or sales meeting with the vendor sales rep. The reason for that is clear, right? Vendor sales reps are positioned as experts in their products and or services, right? They know how to pitch the stuff. Usually, I mean, same here. You have a gamut of talent. But let's say on average, they're going to know how to pitch their solution better than your sales rep, especially if you're starting this relationship. And this is where the partner sales rep are going to learn the most and the fastest by emulating what the vendor sales rep is doing, right? So when people ask me, what is the best format for training and all that, that's my number one answer. It's to say, your vendor sales guys go on sales calls, on sales meetings, and all that with the partner sales guy together, right?
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of benefits from doing this from the vendor side. First of all, is like you have a guarantee here that people are going to talk about your solution because you're here. So you're not going to talk about anything else, right? You're going to talk about
mind share.
Where a sales rep that is not confident enough on how to pitch your solution is going to be in front of one of his customer or one of his or hers prospects, if they don't feel confident enough to talk about your stuff, they're just simply not going to talk about it. Period. Full stop. Right. And if it's a hard demand from the prospect or the customer to talk about what it is that you're doing, they're going to postpone. They're going to say, you know what? If they're good salespeople, they're going to say, you know what? I'm not good enough to talk about this. How about we schedule another call and I'll bring the sales rep from the vendor to talk about it. Right. So that's number one thing. There's a bigger risk than this one when they're all alone in a call, when the partner sales reps are alone in a call, is that not only they sell you, but they sell some of your competitors. Maybe they can talk very well about you and they can talk better about your competitor. Or maybe the margin your competitor is giving is better than the margin you're giving, or whatever situation that will cause them to talk about your competitor. Well, if you're in that call with them, they're not going to talk about your competition. Simple as that, right? Because they don't want to
Yep.
offend you. They don't want to. So it's important for, you know, market perspective and sales perspective, but also for the training perspective. Training perspective, I know nothing better than being next to the expert, looking how he or she does conduct the sale. What are they talking about? How do they, how do they
Overcome objections. Yeah.
overcome objection, pass the message, blah blah blah,
Hmm.
all this kind of thing. Nothing beats that. Nothing beats that.
Absolutely.
And that's not only for sales, that's for any training of anything, right? When it's hands-on type thing and you have an expert next to you, you're going to learn faster than when you're just trying to recall the PowerPoint presentation of the 2-hour training you got 3 weeks ago, right? So that's the one. I can talk about that for hours, so I'm going to move on. Sorry, Aaron,
No,
and
you're
go to the
good.
next one. The next one is going to be on the uh, when there's a strong alignment between a sales rep from the vendor and a sales rep from the partner, especially when it's in front of a customer and or in front of a prospect, it usually leads to a lot of positives, right? The first thing is that if those two individuals work well together, seems to know each other, ham and egg the discussion together and all that kind of stuff, right? Uh, the prospect or the existing customer for the partner is going to feel that. And that creates a lot of confidence that their experience, if they buy this solution, their experience throughout the buying journey and after is going to be a better one, right? Uh, when they see the two salespeople together or pre-sales people, when they see representation of the two companies, the partner and the vendor together in front of them, it is so much. If that is a good dynamic, right? Not if they fight during the discussion or anything, but if it's good dynamic, this increases the chances of purchase significantly, right? And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I would,
Yeah.
uh,
Absolutely.
and
It shows a lot to the customer.
because they see a team now
Absolutely.
that is working well together and all that, and they're like, okay, well, that's that, rather than people that are opposing themselves and or people that don't seem to know each other, right? So that's another one that is very good. I'm not going to expand on this one because I think it's so obvious, but it's one of the big benefit, right? Then you have, so I talked about the increased trust and fear reduction, right? When they feel
Hmm.
the sellers from the vendor are here to support them during sales calls or meetings or whatnot and all that, it just keeps on increasing that removal of the fear of the sales guy at the vendor is my competition. It pushes it away and that kind of stuff, right? And similarly, it increases the trust they have in them. So that's gonna trickle to everything else from communication to many other things. So always good. Another thing that so we talked about the usage of the PRM, right? And that's going to be a topic we'll talk about much later because there's so much to say about this and how poorly designed usually PRMs are. But if you look at your own organization, you're going to realize that you have 50 partners averaging 3 reps by partner. I'm just taking funky numbers just for the sake of the exercise. And you're going to see that you have, so potentially you have 150 users of your PRM, right? And you're going to see that you have half of that are actually signed up. And out of the ones signed up, you have a third of that are actually using it regularly. And when they use it, it's only to position an opportunity registration. They don't do anything else with it, right? There's a reason for that. Generally speaking, again, there's exception, but there's out of the entire curve distribution, you're going to have a majority or a good chunk of the sales population that are not organized. They on top of that, they have like so many logins and passwords because every vendor is a different PRM or a different login at least that they have to do, and all. They don't have the time for that. They'd rather be on the road or on calls with their prospects and customers. So they that's it, right? The reason why you have a tool for the like most PRM offer the channel manager the ability to impersonate the user is that is because these people are not going to do it, and they'd rather give you a call or send you a quick text or an email and say, "Hey, I got a new discussion with company XYZ. The contact is Mr. or Mrs. X. It's for $250,000 in 3 months. Blah blah blah. Can you register it for me, please?" It's I don't know if any of you in the audience have experienced that, but I've experienced this a lot,
Yeah.
and leveraged it, but it's they don't do it right. Same with your document management, system, content management system, your CMS, which is embedded in your PRM usually. They're not going to go and sort all this and try to find what's the best document or slick to present this to a new prospect or whatever. They usually call the channel manager and say, "Hey, can you send me that? What do you have about this? Or do you have a use case for that? Or do you have a case study for this? And do you have a technical diagram for this, and that?" No matter what you do, they're going to do that. Well, now, if there's a good dynamic between the sales team, the two sales team, the salespeople, the partner don't need to do that with you, the partner manager anymore, because they'll go most likely to their counterpart, to their friend, the salespeople of the vendor, and say, use in this situation, right? What do you have good resources for this, for that, for this? I have a meeting in 2 weeks. I'd like to prepare for it. Blah blah blah. Oh, by the way, can you come with me? Type of a thing. But then at this point, that starts morphing the salesperson at the vendor into a support system for your salespeople at the partner, and it's good. It's good that it's not the channel manager for two reasons. First of all, the number one reason that like channel managers are overburdened, massively overburdened, right? Nobody realizes this, but it's insane the amount of things they have to do. And when we say, generally speaking, in the channel, when we say a good channel manager can properly manage 15 to maybe 20 partners at the most, I think it's really a stretch already, given all the things they have to do traditionally.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons why it's good. The other reason why it's good, it's a natural thing. It's because salespeople relate better with other salespeople, right? Uh, and so any reason for them to engage even more outside of a given sales cycle is always a good one, because they're not only going to talk about that, they're going to talk about other things. They're going to have impromptu sales meetings, talk about prospects and this and that, find new ways to do things, agree on doing that show together or doing this, doing that. Better than when your marketing team is just sending thing and say, "Hey, do you want to come to that thing with us?" Blah 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 blah. Right? It's better when it comes from the salesperson, because it's another you, right? It's like it reflects as what you live every day and all that. They know their job, they know your job, theirs, and that kind of stuff. There's a natural ground here for developing a better relationship. So it's good, right? And this will yield to the next one, right? Which is that collaboration between vendor and partner sales will enable them to address and to discuss market trends, changes, all this type of thing by sharing market insights, feedback, intelligence, all this kind of thing. And that ultimately will lead the company to adapt and innovate better, right? If your sales team at the vendor, relays that information to your product team, to your marketing team, to this, and that. When I have discussion about marketing and intelligence within company and intelligence gathering and competitive positioning and all that kind of stuff, I always say something. The best resource for you that you can have is a good partner ecosystem, because the sum of the information you're going to get from your partner ecosystem, and the bigger the partner ecosystem, the better this is, the more efficient this is. The sum of the information you can get from a market, from trends, from this and that, from these guys, is unbeatable by any research you can pay to company X, Y, and Z to do a research for you. Number one, it's unbeatable. Number two, it's validated. Because when you're going to have 95% of your partners that say the red button needs to become a green button, you know you have to do it, right? If they all say that, there's no doubt, right? And
Right.
that avoids waste of investment, what's waste of time, those type of thing. Into a lot of people still think their product, their solution, all that in a bubble. They never ask anybody. With a good collaboration between the salespeople and the two team, you will have access to this information faster, quicker, and more transparently than if you send them
Yeah.
a survey and say, "Hey, tell us what the next iteration of XYZ should be." They won't take the time to do that. If they talk to the other sales guy, they will talk about it, because they will bitch about the fact that the button is red and should be
Yeah.
green, right?
Because their customers are coming to them saying, "Why
Yeah.
is this button red?"
Yes, exactly. Right. Uh, so so all of this, when you sum this up, right, it leads to when you have this good alignment, this good relationship, and all that, it just adds to it, and it just creates a mutually beneficial environment, relationship, and that will increase sales and reduce the sales cycle, and so on and so forth, right? On top of which, what I was indicating will help the partner sales prepare better, will help with the confidence that a potential buyer may have into the team that is in front of them rather than individuals. um, it's product knowledge improvement and product dissemination, and customer satisfaction. Also post sales, right? Because they know the team is working well together. So if there's an issue, they know they're going to be able to solve it together rather than
Hmm.
one trying to coerce the other one to do something. On top of having access to the good resources and the pertinent resources. Because when a sales rep talk to another sales rep and say, "Oh, I saw this paper and about this and that, do you think I should use it?" And the sales rep from the vendor is going to say, "No, that's crap. Don't even bother, right? I got something different. That's Let me send it to you." This type of thing, right?
Yeah.
And all this at the end, kind of ensure, maybe not ensure, but augments the win-win potential for both the vendor and the partner, and that's where you're trying to get at, right? So
Yeah.
that's my
Well, and
piece of the benefits and why you want to do it, right?
yeah, and I think even those conversations that I've been a part of, that it's the partner asking the vendor, the partner rep asking the vendor rep, "Hey, what are other partners doing?" And then the vendor rep saying, "Hey, what are you seeing? What are you seeing out there with other vendors?" Those are the conversations that continue to build and lead to definitely fruitful relationships. You're creating mind share, and you're again building the relationship and
Yeah,
the
and I
partnership.
was
So
mentioning, right, that thing about who owns who, right? Which you shouldn't be caring about this when you're when you're when your sales team don't have this discussion anymore. You know you're on the good track, right? They don't care. They're all going to be benefiting from SL, and that's all that matters
yeah,
to them. Who owns who? It's becomes irrelevant at this point. But from an intelligence perspective, whether it's about the accounts or about the industry or about the geo or about whatever, you cannot trump the sum of what you're as a sales guy or sales lady from a vendor. You cannot get better information than what you're going to get from your partners. And for the reason I mentioned earlier, which is to say, when you're going to sit, so you're selling servers, when you're going to sit in front of a customer, potential customer, trying to sell them servers, you're going to talk about servers. When the partners are going to sit in front of that same person or their their higher level, right? The CIO or somebody that has a function similar. They're not going to talk about servers. They're going to talk about servers and everything else. You're never going to have access to this information as a salesperson, or it's going to be way more difficult because naturally you're not going to go there. And even if you're smart enough and savvy enough as a salesperson to go there and try to understand the entire IT plan, I'm taking IT, but it's valid for anything else.
Right.
It's not a natural thing as opposed to for the partner sales teams. It is a natural thing to do to expand your to grab more of the share of the wallet, to try to understand all this and that. So they're going to know all the other projects, all the things. I've never learned. I used to for Hitachi, I used to have partners managing AT&T, and at the time where AT&T was building more and more and more and more data centers, right? And I never learned from AT&T where the new data centers and when they were going to be built and that kind of stuff. And never. But I learned it from the partners.
Right.
And they were telling me like 12 months ahead of time, 24 months ahead of time, here's the plan. This is how it's going to go. This is where they're going to build this, and this is the capability this thing is going to need to have in bandwidth and in storage and this and that. And I could start preparing with them, a strategy to go after the people that were in charge of building those data centers and do something. If I would have been left by myself there, I would have found after the data center opened that the new data center opened that they had a new one, right? That's just an example, and it's and there's many examples like this, right? So
Yeah.
there's only positives when you have and if you're worried about the margin and you want to take more deal directs because you don't have to give those 20% on that, then stay in the category number one, be a direct only company and suffer the consequences, which is you're not going to be able to scale effectively. Otherwise it is important. So I don't know how much time we have. We have 15 minutes. So, I think we can do the fixing, or we can start talking about the fixing. Right?
Start the fixing. Yeah, Chris had a question in the chat that will start, I think, the conversation with a fixing, and it's helping direct sales teams transition to working with channel partners.
So I'm sorry. Let me look
at how to help direct sales teams transition to working with channel partners.
Well, again, that's where channel teams spend a lot of time in. So let's get into the fixing, right? And that's an important one, and it comes from that. It comes from culture. So that's an important one. I'm of the party, or people don't change. So when you have people that are complete control freaks, which happens a lot in the sales community, and they need to control everything, and that it's going to be tough. And people need to recognize that job of a channel team is not to manage internal heartaches about who owns what and this and that and this, but it's going to be very difficult for a channel manager to go to the sales team and say, you guys have to be more friendly with my partners and this and that. If they do it by themselves, no matter how good you are at pitching, and I think I've developed some talent in pitching this to sales team, because that's always where I in the past 10 years where I started. When I was tasked with building a partner ecosystem or improving on a partner ecosystem, I always started with the salespeople and trying to present them not the next 12 months, but the next 5 years and how that would impact them, right? If you just say, this is what we want to do and we want to develop partner, they don't care. They care about their bottom line. They care about their own stuff and this revenue. And that. So now, if you try to influence all by yourself, the sales team, you're going to have strong personalities and people that are not apt to change again, and they do it their way, and they've been successful doing it their way, and they see absolutely no reason why to change. And their visibility of anything is end of the month, end of the quarter, end of the year. That's it. If you start telling them the next 3 years, the next 5 years, the next, it's going to be difficult. So you don't want to do it like this only, and you certainly don't want to start like that. It has to start from the top. It has, it's easy to say, but it has to start from the top. And the top means the top for most small company. That means the CEO, right? The CEO has to buy and subscribe on this message, and then it has to trickle down. Ideally, if you have the VP of sales or the chief revenue officer associated to that influencers, strong influencers, which is your CEO and the CRO, and they pass this message, it's great. But you will remember what I mentioned earlier when I said no CEO is even going to give a beating, ever going to give a beating to a rep that is making their numbers. Whether they make their numbers direct or not direct, they don't care, right? As long as they make their numbers, they're not going to get a beating for that. So you need to associate this with other things. But culturally, that's the baseline. The company have to have a statement that says we are going to be a channel-friendly company, and yes, this will completely reflect in our co-sell attitude when it comes to our own sales team, right? And they're going to deck this with the right opportunity registration, the right rules of engagement, the right messaging to the internal reps, and so on and so forth. That's the beginning. That's not enough. So somebody mentioned at the beginning of this discussion the compensation. So you have three type of compensation when it comes to sales rep regarding the channel. Channel negative, channel neutral, and channel positive. Channel negative is what happened most of the time. Reps are going to be compensated on the revenue, a portion of the revenue, or the revenue. If their target is revenue, it's revenue, right? If target is margin, it's going to be margin. It's whatever. If it's a combination of both, it's going to be both. But when you calculate a deal, an indirect deal, they're not going to recognize, let's say it's revenue, for example, they're not going to recognize the revenue at the end user. They're going to recognize the revenue. Traditionally, most companies are going to recognize revenue at the first transition of the money, which is the partner. But if you give 20% to the partner, then your $100,000 deal becomes an $80,000 deal, and the rep recognizes only 80,000 instead of 100,000. So there it starts that they want to sell direct instead of selling indirect because they make 20% more when they sell direct. You got to get rid of this, right? You got to find a way to at least not impact them. So that's a very strong developed concept that yet not very, very many companies adopt, which is the concept of channel neutrality, which basically says if you're a rep at a vendor and you sell direct for 100, then when you're going to sell through a partner, your revenue recognition is also going to be 100. The end, right? Or if your commission is $1,000 when you sell this direct, it's also going to be $1,000 where instead of you, it's you plus the rep at the partner that has been selling this, right? Doesn't mean the company lose even more money or leaves more money on the table. Yes, on a short-term thing, but again, channels are not short-term strategy. Channels are long-term strategy. If you think of it today, you have three partners and all that. And they each sell one deal. Yeah, you're losing 20% on three deals. That is like, that's a chunk, right? Okay, but when you're going to have 300 partners, the volume of sales you're going to do is going to vastly offset that chunk that you pass on to the partners, right? Yeah. And that you want to pass on to your reps as well. And that's the goal. If you're only doing this for like having 5 partners that are each going to sell, it's like that you're not in the right place, right? In a right state of mind. So very much agree with the gentleman that mentioned that compensation is absolutely key. So you want the CEO, you want the CRO to be backing you up. You want all the tools around this, UpReg, rules of engagement, blah, blah, blah. But you also want to not penalize your sales team for doing the right thing. right? It's like you do the right thing, you help us build the channel ecosystem, the partner ecosystem, and because of that, you're going to make less money, at least at the beginning. No. So and after that, and usually that's for launching the stuff, right? After
Right.
that, when you have a community of salespeople at the vendor level, when you have a community of salespeople that become smart enough that they become hybrid sales managers, and we'll talk about that at a later thing, but that was one of the model I presented, where they are both channel managers at the same time that they're this. They're not even going to sell anymore because they're going to have a community of partners that are going to do that, and salespeople, more importantly, that are going to do this for them. And they're going to spend most of their time supporting those people, going on calls with them. So yes, they'll be selling, but they won't be doing it the same way they were doing. Most of what they'll be doing will be supporting the new wave of new partners they have because they can't fly solo yet, where the one they were managing 2 years ago are now completely independent and go manage the sales cycle entirely by themselves and only call them to
Right.
come in when you need to convince or to show like a good team spirit in front of a prospect or something like this, right? I know buyers that are asking those questions, right? How do you get along with those vendors that you're putting in front of me today, right? What's the dynamic between
Interesting.
your two companies and those type of thing? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, Likewise, when you recruit partners, I would be very surprised that despite the fear that that the sellers at the vendor level are very often their competition, CEOs of partner companies of VARs and MSSPs and all that, they're gonna wanna meet with your sales team as early as possible. I've been asked this question a million times, honestly, and maybe not a million. I'm not that old, but quite a few times. Where because my message is a feel good message for the partners, and I'm the natural ally to them. When I recruit them, I do the
Right.
recruitment, do this type of thing. They like it. It's warm and fuzzy and all that. The next thing they want is meet the sales team. So they want to know who they're dealing with. They want to know if they're good,
Yeah.
and they want to know if they're channel friendly, right? And they want to start seeing dynamic building. That's why usually when we do that, it's usually around a feel good moment at a bar, during an event, something like that, right?
Yeah.
Or after a training, we're going to go for dinner and we're going to see who sits with who. And we're hoping that the sales people from the partner are going to sit with the sales people from the vendor and start making plans during dinner or at the bar or something like this, right?
Yeah.
So they want that. So back to
Early
back.
account mapping sessions.
Yeah, I've seen
Yeah.
people doing this as early as like the second meeting they were together because
Yeah.
sales reps are smart and understanding that we're going to go after the low hanging fruit. Who do you have a customer that I can get into? Those type of thing. So
Yeah.
the message from the top, right? Um, the tools around it. So your partner program, your opportunity registration program, your rules of engagement, all those type of things, clear, clear, clear. And all this needs to be well communicated. So communication is super important because the last thing you want as a salesperson is go to your prospect to talk about something and look like a doofus because the partner sales rep already talked about all that and you didn't know about it. And
Yeah.
and and the reverse is even more important. Uh, that you as a sales rep for the vendor, you don't do things like as a
Go.
lone cowboy, and then your partner sales rep finds out when he meets with the customer, and this shows the customer that the communication between the two of you is not very good. On top of
Mm-hmm.
that, right? So it dilutes a little bit this level of trusting that you have a good team. So you don't
Yeah.
want to do that. So
No.
communication between, when you agree on a plan and you have target list and this kind of thing, every time you do something with one, make sure you communicate with the other sales rep, the one from the vendor if you're the partner or vice versa. So that's really important. There's other
Yep.
ways to increase this, right? Understanding that there's a number of things you can't control, and you have to be stoic about this. You can't control them. You can't control them. Focus on the reps that are going to be willing to play ball, right? Don't try to win everything to this concept because you won't be able to. and you're going to waste time and resources and creates frustration and stress. You don't want to do that. So focus on the one that are playing ball. But
Joe?
there's always, when you're talking about larger organization, and it's going to be a one size fits all where everybody has to march under the same orders and all that. Then you have to define. So beyond the compensation, what you can do is create buckets and sub targets. So your target is not only you need to do $1 million a year. Now you need to do $1 million a year, out of which 30% of it has to be indirect. If you don't do that, you don't have the same bonus, right? You do that, but you want to do this so at the management level, right? That's a little bit tougher of a discussion to have, but I've taken jobs with the guarantee of a CEO that to build their partner ecosystem, they would be target at the VP of sales level. And the VP of sales will have a target to make his bonus, his big fat bonus at the end of the year, providing all the buckets were met. And one of the buckets was a certain percentage of sales that needed to go indirectly.
Yep. Well, Joe, we have reached the top of our time. So
okay.
This has been a great discussion today. We will provide some additional solutions in the asset that will follow this webinar. Who knows? Maybe we'll continue this this discussion in a part 2. We have so many options, but first I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Again, it was a great topic, great discussion. Recording will be available on our website at gorillaict.com under the events tab, as well as our YouTube channel. So connect and follow us on LinkedIn. And for our next webinar topic, again, follow us, keep an eye out for the date, time, and especially the topic of our next webinar. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Aaron.